Do 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 do. Do 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 do. Welcome to the 200th episode of the Red Room podcast. We are very excited. I am one of your hosts, Scott Ryan.
And I'm another host, Josh Minton.
And if you're watching us on YouTube, which you can because we used to have the face for podcasts, but now we have the face for YouTubes, you can see that we have a special guest with us. Introduce yourself, special guest.
Special guest for episode number 200 is Andrew Grievous from 25 Years Later Site.com, SportsObsessive.com, and HorrorObsessive.com.
Very, very exciting to have you.
Awesome.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. I'm really glad to be here.
So we're going to do a little bit of business about it being our 200th episode. It's been about 10 years. And if we were a real podcast, we would have hit that 200 in year 4. You're muted, buddy. It's worth the wait. It's going to be worth the wait. Still can't hear you. I mean, we could hear him up to this point.
Where did he go?
Oh, there he is. You're back.
Okay. Good.
See, this is how we got to 200, by the way. This level of professionalism.
I'm sorry. What did you even ask?
What do you have any memory of episode 1?
I think it was about Downton Abbey.
Maybe it was. I don't know.
I think it was about Downton Abbey. Downton Abbey was one of the early, if it wasn't the first, it was like the second or third.
Yeah, you could be right. I do not remember. I just remember I didn't know what the hell a podcast was. I didn't know what you were talking about. I didn't understand that it would go out into the world and anyone would listen to it. But you said, let's do this. And I said, okay. And here we are.
Yeah. Here we are. There's been some great moments, I think, in this podcast. I'm thinking of when you interviewed Marshall Herskovitz. The Jetsons guy is certainly a golden moment. Like when we had I think he was retired. I would say
he was retired. Yeah,
did all the sound effects for shows like the Jetsons, and I think there was the Flintstones and a couple other ones. And so I can't remember what happened during that podcast, but the guy said something that was so funny that Scott and I were in the same room and looked at each other and just fell out. I mean, there had to be 30 seconds of just people laughing and heaving on the floor from laughter. And I can't remember what he said, but man, we couldn't go on with that episode.
No, yeah, I do definitely remember that. I also don't remember what he said, but it was ridiculous. And yeah, I mean, we've had incredible guests, great topics, tons of lists. It's been a lot of fun. Andrew, were you a listener did you know of the Red Room before the Blue Rose?
I did. I started listening to podcasts 2016-ish. So I was pretty late to the trend of podcasts, but I had a really boring corporate America job where I sat in a corner by myself and didn't really have any social interaction with a lot of people. And I was like, I need something to listen to. And I was burnt out on all my music. And so I just started thumbing through, what could I listen to? And being a Twin Peaks nerd, I typed in Twin Peaks and you guys popped up in the Google search. Even though you're not a Twin Peaks podcast, the name Red Room kind of directed me to it. So that's how I learned of you.
The algorithm wins sometimes. We win with the algorithm sometimes.
Exactly.
Well, we never wanted to be a Twin Peaks podcast, but we of course always came back to it. And our podcast aired in maybe the best time period of being a Twin Peaks fan, because when we started, there was no hope whatsoever. I mean, I'm sure in our early episodes, we're not even talking oh, maybe it'll come back. Twin Peaks was dead. No. And then we kept saying to each other, well, that's the last episode we'll ever do on Twin Peaks. We'll never do something else. And then, oh, Laura Palmer's diary is out. Well, that's the last one. Oh, there's missing pieces. And
yeah, I feel like we had a conversation about somebody was working on the music for the Firewalk with Me and Missing Pieces stuff. And it was like a year before that even came out. And that was really, I think, when it started to ramp up. It's like, oh, people are starting to get interested again in this topic. And then, of course, when the thing was announced, I was all in. Once they announced they were coming back for a season 3, I was like, "Oh, I got to see this." I'm gonna dial in on this.
Andrew, for you, what is your relationship at 25 years later and Twin Peaks? I mean, is it all positive or is it a semi anchor?
Like my personal
No,
relationship
like
or
not your
business?
personal business, like, because you're called 25 years later, which is of course from there, but you've shortened that to 25YL and things like that. So I mean,
Yeah.
what is your relationship, or I guess I should say, what is your website's relationship with Twin Peaks?
So Twin Peaks, like the original design for 25YL was a time capsule. It was going to be me writing about Twin Peaks coming back, and it would be like a year. And I had every intention of writing some cool stuff while the show was on and just being done. And my hope was that years later, when Twin Peaks fans continued to discover the show, they would come to the site and be like, "Oh, this website was really cool. Too bad it only lasted for a year." And it just kind of kept growing. When I first started posting in the Facebook groups, like, I'm starting this website, and people are like, "I want to join you." I was like, okay. Had no intentions of other people writing with me. And it really just kind of blew up from there. And the night that part 8 aired was the scariest night in my life in many ways, because I remember getting on social media and reading a comment on Facebook that said, "I can't wait to hear what 25 years later has to say about this episode." And I knew that I was the writer who was on deck to write about that episode. And I remember sitting there thinking, like, I've created something that people are invested in, that they're looking forward to, and now they have expectations of us. And it scared me. I thought that it was this cool little project that people were like, "Yeah, that was awesome." But now it had taken on a relevance that was not expected. And that was also the night that I realized I have to do something beyond Twin Peaks. So to get back to your original question, the ideas that I had for the Twin Peaks material kind of formed what the website would become long term. That we weren't going to be shallow reviews, that we were going to be analytical and in depth, but appeal to passionate fans. So nowadays, if you're a passionate fan of the Sopranos or Buffy or Lost or X-Files or whatever show it might be, we have content that can appeal to that. For the hardcore fans that know everything about that show, they can still come to our website and find some takes that perhaps they haven't read before. But we also appeal to newer fans that are just getting their foot in the door with a fandom. So Twin Peaks built the blueprint for what the website would become. I think that answers your question.
Well, it makes me have another question in there for both of
Okay.
you. And then I'll jump in. But because it's interesting where you talk about that night of watching part 8 and that being a seminal moment, and you had to write something. Do either of you honestly remember your first reaction to part 8? I mean, now we've seen it so many times, we've read so many things, but can you go back and tell me your initial? Go ahead, Josh, you go first, and we'll give Andrew a second to think about it. Can you really remember watching it the first time?
Yeah, I of course I do. Yeah, I mean, I in about an hour before that happened, I saw something on Twitter. Something popped up where someone had said tonight is going to be something very special or something like that. That was the only leak that I had heard about that, and so that kind of already set the tone for what you're about to see. Is like, okay, something is about to happen here. And when it was over, my only reaction was, don't react. I mean, I was in a state of sublime, existence for the half hour after that episode aired. I knew enough that I didn't want to try and answer what I had just seen, and I knew that I was going to need to sit with this for a very long time.
Did you go online and look for answers?
I did. Hell no, absolutely. I didn't care what anyone else thought about Twin Peaks at that point in time. I was taking my own notes. I was writing my own shit. I had to have that experience for myself as insulated as possible, and I've maintained that to this day for the most part.
Mm-hmm. Andrew, what about you? What do you remember about seeing it the first time?
So when Twin Peaks was on the air, I did not watch it at 9 o'clock when it would come on like everybody else. I would wait an hour or two. And my reason being was I have young kids and I wanted them in bed, and I wanted a quiet house, and I wanted to be able to turn off the lights and to really like get into the episode. so I sat down and I was like, okay, like I had heard the rumblings that this was going to be a pretty interesting episode to say the least. So I was excited. And my fiance, who is not a Twin Peaks fan at all, only seems to walk in the room for the weirdest episodes. Like for part 3, she walked in the room when Cooper's like floating through space, and she's like, "This is the shit you watch." Like she has no context to the story, but she walked in the middle of part 8, and she's like, "Press pause for a minute," and I did, and she's like, "Have you heard of a book called The White Sands Incident?" And I was like, no. And she starts telling me about this book. And I drew a lot of parallels from what she was saying to what I was seeing with the origin story for Bob. And that night I read a Cliff Notes version of the book. And I was like, oh, maybe Mark Frost did have some inspiration from this. So that one is, that particular episode is pretty clear in my mind, just because I never stopped an episode or pressed pause. And she's like, no, you need to hear this. Like, there's something to this book and what you're watching. So I found that to be interesting.
Was she your fiance at that point?
Yeah, we've been engaged for like ever.
Well, because I just like that she said press pause and didn't talk through TV. So right there,
Yeah.
I'm saying that's someone you married.
That's someone raised right.
Right.
Keeper.
Yeah, you say pause that.
Yeah.
You don't just talk while TV's
Well,
going.
what I heard
like
from that story is that a single, scene in Twin Peaks actually became a conversation point between you and someone else who's not a Twin Peaks or David Lynch fan, and that says volumes, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Yep.
So I think it's funny. I know that when it was over, I went outside and took a walk and talked to someone on the phone. And I have no idea who that someone is. Isn't that interesting? I really don't know. So if they're listening, send me a text and tell me if you're the person I talked to that night, because I don't think it was John Thorne. I wonder if it was Courtney. I don't know who it was. I talked to someone on the phone. Yeah, I think it was a girl, but I don't know. And because Jen fell asleep like right away, and I knew I wasn't sleeping that night, and I didn't sleep like that. I loved it so much from the get-go, and it was what I was wanting in the return, and beyond part 3, it was the only time I got it. I mean, part 3 and part 8 for me sitting here in 2021 are the only parts of the return that I keep with me. The rest of the return is a discard for me, but I loved it so much. I was like, finally, like there's a glimmer of Twin Peaks for the first time.
It's interesting because a few years later, like part 17 has become that part for me. And I think a lot of it really is the Sarah Palmer scene. That captivated me on an emotional level in the way that very few things have. And it was very reminiscent of the reveal episode in season 2 to me. I had those same feelings sitting there on my couch, just watching Sarah Palmer. It was that creepiness that Lynch can pull off at times that nobody else can. But it was also this very surreal human moment for her. And thinking about Twin Peaks all these years, thinking about the return a few years later, that moment with Sarah Palmer might be the defining moment of the whole 18 hours for me.
Interesting.
It got to me on a really primal level.
Great.
Just for fun, Josh, do you have a moment in the return like that?
That I have several moments in the return.
Well, I know, but do you have one? Like he said, that's
his
his seminal one. And for me, it would actually be part 3 over part 8. It would be the whole mob thing.
Well, I want to hear about this before I give you my answer. So tell me your answer.
Oh, well, that's
what's the scene?
Like, no, the whole I call it the mauve scene. I don't know what the world calls it, but everything with Cooper, with the American girl, and Mother's Coming, and that whole scene, like, I loved it. I love that. That's what I want from Twin Peaks. I really don't. There's so much. I don't want Red. I don't go to Twin Peaks to see Red and Shelley talk. That's just not for me as much, so to me, that's the moment of the return that I probably carry with, because I think about it. I would sit down and watch that right now. And I think the only parts of the return I've seen since September 3rd, 2017 is that mauve part and part 8. Those are the only 2 parts I've ever gone back for. I can't imagine I'll ever watch it again.
Well, that makes me very sad. First of all,
Good.
second of all,
I'm here to make you
you've been
sad.
making me sad.
Wait till we talk about Ted Lasso and The Sopranos.
Oh my God.
There's more sadness to come.
It's going to be great. My scene is a strange scene. It's a scene most people probably wouldn't pick, but it's the cherry pie scene that morphs into the restaurant scene with the piano ballad in the background. We're going to talk about kindness and the value of empathy when we speak about Ted Lasso. But to me, the thing that sticks with me about The Return is the power of empathy, just from one person exhibiting empathy in the right scenario with the right situation, and you can turn the hardest hearted person around. Like, that being exhibited in art is the single most important thing that Twin Peaks: The Return conveys. It ain't about Bob, it ain't about none of that shit. It's about the power of empathy to actually change hard-hearted people into something different. And there is no more important story in America right now than how to turn hard-hearted white people into something different. And so I think about that scene quite a bit in Twin Peaks.
I mean, I could take this podcast over by saying you think that if Nancy Pelosi shows empathy to Mitch McConnell, that we'll have a budget, but we're not going to get political. Hey,
No, we're not
getting political. So, hey, let's take a hard right turn after he drops Mitch McConnell's name. Andrew, so you have an exciting announcement to make.
Which has nothing to do with Mitch McConnell.
Right.
Nothing.
Oh, God.
Mitch McConnell is not guest writing an article. I promise. That makes me wonder, if Mitch McConnell were to guest write an article, what show would it be about?
Billions?
Billions. That's a good answer.
That's as fast as I can come up
I
with.
might actually read that.
Maybe
I might actually
maybe
read
like a character profile on the cigarette smoking man from the X-Files.
There you go.
That could
That's
work.
a good one.
Good answer. Good answer.
Yeah, so thank you for the segue there. This is not at all what I imagined, but I like it. So I approached you guys a few weeks ago about being where I dropped this announcement that next year 25YL will cease to exist. And
now wait a minute, we killed you?
You killed me. Deader than Laura Palmer.
She comes back.
Yeah, but just like Laura Palmer was rebranded as Carrie Page,
yes,
we will be rebranding. In its place, there will be TV obsessive, film obsessive, and music obsessive to go along with the already standing sports obsessive and horror obsessive. Scott kind of brought this up earlier with the connections from 25YL to Twin Peaks, and essentially we've outgrown that brand, and we're in kind of an interesting place where we had to take some major steps forward and creating these new sites that can be specific to one content type, and creating a collection of sites that will be linked together. If you're on TV obsessive, you can easily move over to film obsessive. But we found that if you're a music fan, you might not want to read the TV articles on the site. If you're a sports fan, you might not care about the film articles. So giving everything a space to breathe and to be on its own, and to kind of move away from our original branding into something that still carries on that spirit, which is obsessive. That is our brand, obsessive, but it's on its own, and a person who loves television can come to TV obsessive when that site launches next year and find tons of content that appeals to just them. And the same for music or sports or whatever the case may be.
So will you have a landing page that has the headline for each thing? Like, can I go, I'm kind of thinking of you as the USA Today. You're kind of becoming that, where you have these different sections.
In a sense, it is. So the parent company, like my company that I own, is 25YL Media. So there will be a 25ylmedia.com, which which will link to all these sites, and then anything else that the parent company eventually will be on there is sportsobsessive.com, and go to that site. I like to use the AV Club analogy. If you go to the AV Club, you're just looking at that website, but it also shows you the other sites that are owned by the same parent company. if you want to go to Gizmodo or any of the other sites that they own, they're easily linked to. You can navigate from one to the other. But if you're just a fan of the AV Club, you're not looking at the other content unless you want to. And it's that same kind of model that we're going to be using.
Right.
I think that's a great idea.
First of all, congratulations. It's a big milestone step. And it is a rebranding, but it's also just a restructuring. I think aligning to channel-based forms of how we get our news and entertainment is a very smart thing to do. I look at what you've built out. There's a gestation period. You've built an audience of tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of readers, and it just makes a lot of sense to specialize in channel-based communications. And I speak as someone who sells software for a living, so I go into the biggest companies in the world and tell them, if you're going to talk in channels. Don't just talk. Nobody cares about the stream of conversation, but if you talk about a certain thing, now you can really get down to the micro segmentation that you need to drive a real audience with real engagement. So it's just super smart, Andrew. I'm proud to know you. I'm proud to see this milestone happen.
Thank you. First off, and we launched Sports Obsessive right as the pandemic was happening last year, and that was supposed to be kind of the entryway into seeing if this model would work. Sports, more than anything, took a huge hit because of the pandemic. So didn't get to be the template that we hoped for. And the site, it had a rough start, but it's regrouped well. But the plan was in October of last year to launch Horror Obsessive, and just to appeal to horror fans and kind of have that be the litmus test. Is this channel-based setup going to work for us? And we found that it's a resounding yes. The people who were coming to 25YL for our horror content moved over there, and then we gained a ton of new fans and readers who didn't know that a site called 25 Years Later Psych.com had content that would appeal to them. But Horror Obsessive, that name caught their attention. And now we're able to plan for a lot of interesting things next year for that channel. As in the beginning, when we were just Twin Peaks based, we were very community based. The social media conversations, and people felt like we were a place that they could come to talk about Twin Peaks. And essentially, we get to recreate that now with these new channels, and that to me is really exciting.
Yeah.
So, when it comes to sports, what's the biggest sport for you? Hit-wise, like what gets the most hits? What sport gets the most hits?
We've found that really specific fantasy football content is the big hit driver. People who want very detailed topics, not just fantasy football in general, but like the diehards that want very specific things to look up. They tend to bring in the most traffic. Professional wrestling brings in a lot of traffic, and then baseball, now that we're in playoff time, baseball is bringing a lot of traffic too.
Interesting. I am a Massillon Tiger fan. They're a high school football team in Massillon, and possibly the most famous high school football team in the country. I'm not just saying that. I mean, like they've been around since 1894. I mean, it's a big thing. And what amazes me is there is no online content for the Massillon Tigers. And I now live in Florida. I used to live in Ohio. And there's nowhere for me to find out. And I always think man, if I had time, and I'm not offering, I would love to cover the Massillon Tigers for you, because I feel like it's something that people really are interested in. And so I was curious if football was up there and if you've even touched high school football at all.
We don't yet. And so here's kind of the vision that I've had for Sports Obsessive that we're not completely there yet with. I loved the old newspaper setup with beat writers, where you had a writer in your local newspaper that would write about your local team 5 days a week. And I've wanted to recreate that in an online sense, but where you could come and you could see the beat writers from multiple teams, from multiple sports. and to really appeal to those obsessive types. There's somebody out there who wants to read about their baseball team or their football team a few times a week, all the news and updates. And it's an old school sentiment, but in a modern context where you're combining all of these passionate beat writers in one setting, it's fresh and unique. And we've started to do that in a sense, and we're experimenting. We've got a St. Louis Cardinals beat writer, and they have obviously been on a tear as we're moving into baseball's postseason. And Cardinals fans found us, and it's been really cool to watch that content kind of move up. In football, Green Bay Packers, more so than a few of our other teams that we've tried, they've found our Packers beat writer and they've really championed him. So to kind of get back to your point about high school football, like I think there is a market for single team specific content on all levels of all sports. And that's what I'm trying to do long term. It's just kind of a slow push. In the modern world of journalism, people find that to be kind of an antiquated idea, and I completely disagree, and I'm out to prove them wrong.
We couldn't be more off topic, but why is it antiquated? That's the way
I'll tell you why, because the algorithm feeds on outrage now, and outrage is how you get to the top of the list. It's how you get amplified on any platform, name one. It's all the same. So for someone to come out and tell you what they love about something, even if it's critical, it's okay if it's critical, as long as it's not cynical, right? When critics become cynics, they can fuck off. I don't want to hear nothing from there, from that point on. But when someone comes and talks about something that they're passionate about down to the molecule, they like Twin Peaks. We all know we can get into a conversation here about something that we all share passion about. We're probably going to do it with the Sopranos here in a minute. It's unique because not a lot of people are willing to expose themselves on that angle, but they'll tell you what they hate. They'll tell you what they hate all day long because that's what feeds the algorithm. But I think what you're trying to do here is create a new paradigm within the algorithm. And I champion it, my friend. I do.
We've seen some success with it, more so with TV than anything. And just kind of going back to those shows that people champion, if you were to pull up a list of the most read articles on 25YL, it's those shows that have those dedicated fan bases. Like it's Red not Oaks. Weekly TV. Yeah, you did pretty good on that.
I did.
But I laugh because I call myself a boomer bust writer. There's some times where I get a ton of traffic, and then there's other times where my articles are some of the lowest rated among all of our writers. But my article on the Kevin Finnerty episodes in the Sopranos is number 5 on the all-time most read list. And I laugh because a lot of people hated those episodes, but they wanted to know more about them. And I enjoy sitting at number 5 on the most read list.
That's the secret to the whole show, is in the Kevin Finnerty episodes. I mean, look, we'll probably talk about this here in a minute, so I'm gonna hold off on it.
I think that's really interesting, and I say you do it. I'm sorry I'm being so, I don't like sports. So that's the funny thing that I'm asking about this. Like, I only love my Tigers, which is like the most ridiculous part of my character. And if you could remove it from my soul, I would pay money to have it removed, because I'm not a sports person and I can't take it. Like, the games kill me. Like, when I go to a Broadway show, you don't wonder how it's going to end. You don't know if you're going to lose at the end. Like, I just don't like it.
Right.
That's neither here nor there. But I just don't understand. So what articles would anyone else write but on that? Like, what is successful in the sports world?
In the sports world, it does vary by sport, but in general, people tend to take bigger picture approaches to things. They're looking at the sport as a whole, or they're looking at, to Josh's point, it's more outrage commentary, and we don't want to do that.
No, who would want to read that? Why would I don't want to read
people
that.
Do, man. It's crazy.
I didn't know that's what's out there. I mean, that's so interesting to me. So that's why I can't find that. And I mean, seriously, like, if I was living back in Massillon, I think about it all the time. that I would love to start up a website. I'd be coming to you and saying, okay, you're Cincinnati based, and people down there know Paul Brown. He's from Massillon. So, you know, it's all connected. The Cincinnati Bengals are Bengals because of the Massillon Tigers. And it would be, I swear it would be successful. I don't have the time. Maybe next year.
Maybe next year.
We'll see how you go.
Scott, there's an audience in Massillon. I mean, it's a diehard audience.
Oh yeah, I mean, 10,000 people. Well, they are. There's Facebook groups, but no one is creating content. There is no content for it, and it bothers me being away because I just want to find out what players are playing, or what's going on in the town, and just whatever you normally, who's directing the game. Is that how it works? Maybe it's coaching.
Directing.
We're so far off topic. I apologize.
Andrew, I guess that's lead to a question about scale. So, if we take what Scott just laid out there, how many thousands of high school football teams are there? Then go up to the regional teams and the professional teams, college teams. I mean, foreign sports, like that subject is so big, and it can get so it can stack up as you start to get all those little audiences built up together. How is scale in your mind? Like, where are you at with how to scale this?
Yeah, so it kind of becomes the same thing as 25YL rebranding, in the sense that eventually you get to a point where you have to look at a spinoff. So let's say hypothetically we recruited 100 high school football writers from around the country, and that started to overpower the rest of the content on the website. Then you have to look at creating a separate channel for that. Right now, I think we have a pretty cool mix. Like, if you were to go to the homepage for Sports Obsessive, you're going to see boxing content, you're going to see wrestling content, football, a gambling article on football betting. There's baseball content. There's a nice mixture. We never want one sport to overpower the rest. The goal is to, on a global level, because I want to appeal to people outside of the United States, with us living in the streaming world that we do. I know just as many British people who love American football as I do Americans who love American football. And there's not a lot of websites that capitalize on that. And that was part of the initial idea for Sports Obsessive, is the world has become smaller. And how do we make that accessible to everybody? So it's interesting. We have a British lady who has never watched American football until about 6 months ago, and found a documentary. And she's like, I want to do a series of articles on being a British woman who is being introduced to the NFL. And I said, I love it. Let's do it. And it's great content. She has no concept of the rules, but she's learning as she goes. And it's fun to watch that journey. And I think American football fans appreciate that too. Somebody from the other side of the ocean who's developed this interest. It's cool.
Well, someone who's just written a book about, English something, it's people want to feel smarter than the person who they're reading. Like, it's rare that you get that opportunity to actually be smarter than the writer that's writing the piece of content. And I really like that a lot. I think that's a really cool idea.
I felt, go ahead, Scott.
Well, I was just going to say that I've sort of just discovered that in my writing, and I do that in my Fire Walk With Me book. I make mistakes just so you can feel better than me.
Yeah, that's an old sales trick too. If you're writing an email, deliberately misspell a few words so that they realize, okay, I can have a conversation.
Yeah, my spelling mistakes are 100% honest. It's not that. It's just that I don't mind being wrong in my writing and then I come back around to it. But you go on a journey. And it's okay to let the writer or the reader be smarter than you. As an example, let's say that, and this is not in my book at all, I'm totally making this up, but let's just say I say that Philip Jeffries doesn't exist. He's a figment of Gordon Cole's mind, let's say. So I might start out saying that that's true, just so the reader would say, what? That's bullshit. It can't be true. And then you work it through and come to that conclusion. But I've just noticed that I've started to do that. And I think it's about being brave to be wrong. I'm brave enough to be wrong.
Oh, you've never cared about being wrong?
No.
Since I've known you.
It means nothing to me.
And I think having that freedom as a writer is really liberating, whether you're your own boss or you have a publisher who's saying, like, go ahead, do that. And I feel like that's an atmosphere that we've like really protected on 25YL. And some of our Twin Peaks writers, especially, like really wanted to go out there on some crazy limbs. And I always said, do it, like why not explore this train of thought and make sure that you can make it interesting, that it doesn't seem like something that you just wrote on the back of a napkin with no kind of like narrative proof or anything. But as long as you can back it up in one way or another, do it. And somebody out there is going to call you a moron, but there's going to be somebody out there that is interested in it too. And that person's going to say, I have not seen this anywhere else.
Right.
Yeah,
engagement is good.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Being ignored is the worst.
Exactly.
And we all know that by heart. Andrew, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the work, like the behind the scenes stuff, because I have a little bit of visibility into this, having written some stuff for you. And you do a lot, like your entire culture from a writing perspective, from an editing perspective, from a pitching and idea perspective is done in Discord channels. And it's one of the most effective, honestly, and believe me, I sell this stuff every day. So it's one of the most effective digital organizations for managing small projects, let's call them, but they're small writing, publishing projects. Can you talk to us a little bit about how that culture works, how the operations work? I just find it fascinating. I think people would benefit from it.
Yeah, and this all grew from a much smaller scale when we were Peaks only back in 2017, but when writers join us, I interview everybody myself, and it's typically an exchange of a few emails. I read something you've written and we talk ideas. And I remember hearing that David Lynch during his auditions would ask you questions like, what was your first car? And questions like that to get to know your personality. And for me, it's always, I want to know your passions. What is that, not only that show that you love, but what's that episode of that show and that really gets to you on a primal level, and why? And those are the kind of people that I want to work with, and I think that creates a pretty cool atmosphere to start, where you get to find out like who these people are, what makes them tick. And it's like, okay, yeah, this person's creative, I want to give them a chance. But people pitch their first article or two to me or one of the other senior editors. And then we bring them into Discord once we know that they'll be a good fit within our system. And in there, you tell us ahead of time, like, what conversations do you want to be involved in? Are you a TV writer? Are you a music writer? And you outline, well, I see myself being interested in these things, but not these. And then you get added to those conversations. And we do have ongoing series, we're trying to recruit people for certain things, but we very much want to hear writers' pitches. What is it that you want to bring to the table? And so writers bring up their ideas, and then we agree upon deadlines. We don't force deadlines on people. It's like, what's realistic for you? Is this something that you could have submitted in 3 weeks, or do you need 2 months to work on it? Like, you tell us what works for you, and that way the work comes first. You're not rushing to meet some deadline, but we've got all the time in the world in digital media, and we want quality of work over anything else. So that's kind of the high level overview of how the Discord part of it works. And then we also have channels in Discord that are just designed for conversation. What's that TV show that you're watching? And a lot of times that's how the best ideas come about, is two writers that are watching the same show or just going back and forth, and boom, an idea comes up.
Yeah, it's the conversation piece of it, I think, is the most interesting, because that's actually work. That's work that's being done in a very creative way. It's an environment of trust. It's an environment of respect. It's an environment of empathy and inclusion. I've never, in any of the conversations that I've kind of dipped in and out of, I've never seen anyone disrespected on the face of their ideas or anything like that. So, I just think it's something you don't talk about a whole lot, but you've created a really interesting environment of trust with your writers and your editing staff, where people feel safe to come and offer you, these little secrets inside themselves. Right.
Thank you. We try to be pretty quick about removing any bad apples. We had a few that kind of got through the interview process, and we saw a different side of them afterwards, and we had to act on it. But the personalities and the vibe and the atmosphere is crucial, because if people don't feel like it's a safe environment or a creative environment, they don't want to be with us. So that falls on me. I have to act quickly to get anybody out that is going to disrupt the feel of the place, because it always needs to be comfortable and creative first.
It's great.
So what information do listeners need to have to find this? What will they do? Let's say I have you bookmarked because I want to see what you're saying about TV. Am I going to lose my bookmark? What do listeners need to know? And when's this going to happen?
So it's going to be a longer process. We are aiming for April of next year for everything to happen. This is a massive job to move all these articles to new websites, but not just that, all of the other things behind the scenes, creating the social media accounts, getting the staff together, because if Music Obsessive is its own website and not just a few articles on 25YL, you need more editors, you need more writers, you're ramping up the content. So I wanted to get this message out now that, hey, we're doing this next year. It's happening. I hope you're excited. Over the next few months, follow us on social media, because we're going to keep you updated on what's happening as we roll out the new Twitter accounts and things like that. But also for recruiting, that we have a little over 100 people that work on the 3 sites that we have now. But as we become 5 sites, realistically, I've got to add a lot of people. And I want to put this out, if you've always wanted to write about music, and whether it's album reviews, or if you want to write about that album from 1968 that still holds a sentimental place to you and you have something interesting to say about it, I want to hear about it. We're never just going to be cranking out new album reviews. It is always going to appeal to obsessive fans. Same with film. We'll have new film reviews, but we are just as interested in writing about one scene in one film from 25 years ago that had an impact on you, that you have something to say. And that's kind of the nature of these obsessive sites, is new and old. It's still the same concepts behind 25 years later, only bigger, and obsessive really is the best word to describe it, because if you love music or you love TV, you care about the past, present, and future of that medium. And these websites are going to appeal to that. So this is my sales pitch. I want to find the people who have always wanted to write about film, or have always wanted to write about that high school football team that's passionate to them. It's time to come join us.
I think he's talking about me.
I'm talking
You
about
could have a beat.
I'm thinking about it. Man, I wish I just had the time.
How many times in your life have you said, I want that, and then you ended up doing it? I mean, like it's every great project you've ever done, Scott Ryan. So just
I know, but sometimes just busy. I hate the word busy. It's my least favorite word because we're all busy, but we're ramping up at FMP and doing 6 books for the first time. And I just have a lot going on. It would be like such a waste of my time, like actually doing what I want, but it's hard for me to say, but I'm thinking about it. But how should someone contact you?
Yeah, I'm pretty easily accessible on Twitter and Facebook, and then also email andrew@25ylmedia.com. So that's always a surefire way to get a hold of me. But yeah, the other part of this is that I think 25YL has always been known as a written word site. You come to us just for articles. And I think the one other big change that people are going to see is a lot more audio video content from us next year. Part of the rebranding and moving into these separate channels is going to be more of these new mediums, whether it's podcasts, more narrated articles, more YouTube content. We want to appeal to people who sometimes prefer to listen, sometimes prefer to watch, sometimes want to read. And I'm stealing that from Ben Durant. That was an amazing thing that he said to me a few years ago, 2018 maybe, read, watch, listen. And that just stuck with me. You're not always in the mood to read an article. Sometimes you want to put your headphones in and listen to something, or sometimes you want to be visually stimulated. And these websites are going to appeal to all 3 of those. That's the word I'm looking for, those 3 mediums.
Mm-hmm. Well, I love it. I think it's, it's been so fun to watch you grow and all that you've done. I hope you stay with articles because I will say I'm old and getting older by the moment. And it annoys me when I just want to find something out and you want to make me watch a stupid video where can you not tell me where the button is in InDesign so I can do that? I don't want to watch your YouTube video. Just tell me, click here, click here, click here. I know that makes me old. Pile it on. But
That and 1,000 other things, my friend.
oh yeah, and it's getting worse.
we we will always lead with the written word and then provide alternatives for those who want them. I think that's the best way I can put it.
I like it.
It's an old story, Scott. First there was the word, and then the word was made flesh. So
I never read that book. We didn't. FMP didn't publish it, so
They
I
didn't
didn't
publish
read
that
it.
one.
No, we didn't. We couldn't fact check it. Wait a minute.
man, I set you up for that one, dude.
Walked right into that
one. So let's go to The Sopranos.
Let's do it.
Andrew, I didn't realize this. Josh said before, he's like, Andrew's a big Sopranos fan, which this worked out perfectly. Then we all three just watched the movie within the last 24, 48 hours. Yep. Go first, Andrew. What are your initial thoughts on the Sopranos movie?
It was not what I expected, and I say that in a good way. There's a lot that still has to wash over me. I finished the film last night at 2 a.m. So we're 12 hours removed from that. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there. My first thought was that it was a love letter to Christopher Moltisanti, almost more than Tony. And I'm still really playing with a lot of the family dynamics there and comparing Dickie to Christopher. Like that was the first thing that really hit me, just seeing how those two characters interacted. And the tagline of "Who made Tony Soprano" was also really playing through my mind, because the obvious answer is Dickie, but the film told us that it was so much more than that. And like all of David Chase's work, specifically The Sopranos, there's a lot to think about. And I look forward to having these kind of conversations over time and also writing about it, because there's just so much to say on this film.
Josh?
I didn't have many expectations. That I had seen the trailer, so I knew, some of the scenes. I was pleasantly surprised to find those scenes erratically out of order. If I had an order in my mind on where those scenes would be placed, none of them were in the right order, and it was wonderful. The second thought I have is that it's redefined Tony's character. It's redefined the character of Tony Soprano in a way where he actually has a complete story arc now. We saw what innocent Tony Soprano was and what happened to him by the time we meet him in the first scene of the first pilot episode when he's sitting in Melfi's office. So the journey that happens in the gap between where we finally see young Tony in the Many Saints in New York and what happens in that psychiatrist's office is a corruption of the soul. And I'm going to bring in Cooper and Mr. C into that. It's the same conversation. What is it about a soul's corruption over time? And, who made Tony Soprano? His family made Tony Soprano. We saw that very, very clearly. It wasn't just Dickie, it was his mother. All that stuff was in there. And it magnified the elements of the Sopranos all 6 seasons in a way that it wasn't before now. It wasn't before now. And so that's where I'm sitting, a few hours after finishing it last night.
It's funny. I watched it last night too. So, first of all, I was thinking about that, like, because I was thinking, I bet you everyone in the world is watching this, and all 3 of us were. So I'm going to extrapolate. Therefore, everyone was. What a strange time we live in, where you just consume something, you eat it, and it's gone. I find that just fascinating, but that's not our discussion, I suppose. But I was thinking about that. Like in 3 weeks, is anyone going to remember the Sopranos movie? Is anyone going to be watching it, or will it be, off and gone?
It's at the theater too.
Right, but do you think anyone went? I mean, if you could watch it on HBO, I don't know. It's just an interesting time that everyone sees a movie at the same time. So if I didn't annoy listeners and the world with my political joke or my religious joke, let me do the third rail for everyone to hate me. I have not seen The Sopranos. I've only seen the first 2 years. Okay. And I got out of it all I needed to get out of the first 2 years. By all means, hate me for that. But, you know, when I crack a show, it's hard for me to continue on. And I sort of got what they were doing, and I just was never interested in watching the rest of it. So I'm not standing
You saw
here
the
as
final episode too, right,
I
Scott?
did see the final episode. Yeah. But I didn't watch it all. So I don't know who anybody is. So I'm like the worst person. I'm not sitting here as some major brilliant critic like the two of you. I'm just saying I watched it as a movie. I thought it was pretty good. I thought it was better than the show. And what I really thought when I was watching it, and this is my question to the two of you, why did you guys like it? Because to me, it was not The Sopranos. The reason, like, there was a lot of action, something happened. They had a story that went from here and it went to here, and it actually had an ending. And The Sopranos never did. Like, the whole point of The Sopranos was nothing matters, nothing happens, nothing changes. That, you know, let's just watch that over and over again, all the way to the very end. So when I was watching it and I enjoyed it, I thought, I think fans are going to hate this. So that's my first question to you guys. Why'd you guys like it? Wasn't it not The Sopranos?
Andrew, you go first, buddy.
I think it was The Sopranos. I think that Sopranos fans tend to be divided, and there's the camp that loves the way that David Chase's mind operates and the places that he wants to go as a writer, especially when exploring the human condition. And then there's Sopranos fans who are a bit more interested in the mafia elements of the show. And I've noticed a lot of people who were more interested in the mafia elements of the show did not like the film. The people who championed David Chase's exploration of the way that people operate seem to really like the film. For me, learning about Dickie was the draw. You know, even more than young Tony, I wanted to meet Dickie Moltisanti. That was just like, that was a cool thing to me, to finally see this character walk and talk and breathe. But I've always been really fascinated by Christopher in the show. You know, Tony is obviously an amazing character. Christopher's the one that really gets to me on a tragic Shakespearean level. And seeing his father added this whole other layer to my feelings about Christopher. And then I'm drawing these comparisons in my mind between the two of them right now that I don't know if I want to go on record with them just yet.
Sure.
But I think there's a lot of things that father and son have in common. And then there's a lot of things that Tony Soprano and his father and uncle and mother have in common. And we're exploring two generations of these families and seeing some cycles repeat. And that to me is interesting storytelling. You know, we knew the end game for Christopher. We saw how Tony's story wrapped up. You know, you can debate what the final scene meant, but I had a conclusion in my mind that I've written a few articles about, and that to me was the end of Tony's story. But seeing the other generations involved, adding a family dynamic, who made Tony Soprano? Josh was right, his family did. You know,
yeah, but we knew
everybody.
that. I mean, I knew that from watching 2 seasons. There's no way someone just got that from watching that movie, right?
No. I mean, I think it reinforced that, but I think seeing that Tony Soprano to me did not have a chance. That was a big thing that I got out of it, was that, you know, in the show it's ambiguous. Do we champion Tony, or do we look at him as somebody who was just born into this life? And the film takes a stand on that. Tony was born into this life. He did not have a chance to be that good person that he speaks of being in the film, that Dickie speaks of being in the film. Their life circumstances put them in a certain area of life. They provided them with certain opportunities to do bad, and they followed up on those opportunities. And even when they wanted to do good, it was their family that was pushing them towards bad. And that to me, it's heavy. You know, it left me with a heavy feeling. And there's a scene in the film where Dickie kills his mistress. We're getting into heavy spoiler territory here.
Yeah.
That blew me away. Like, that was a gut punch in the same way that Adriana's death was.
And shit, he killed his father too. I mean, like,
yeah,
this was not a good guy. He deserved what he got.
Yeah, not a good guy at all. But there's something, tragically broken about him. And I don't know, the way that Chase writes these characters to where we see them do these despicable things, yet we see the humanity in them, and we see the good in them, and we see them wanting to escape the bad. It really draws me in, and it makes me think about these people, and it makes me think about humans in general. We all do bad things at times. We all do good things at times. And it's just very true to life in that sense. And I know I'm totally rambling here.
No,
No, not at all.
I mean, no, it's good. Josh, what about you? I mean, how do you think the pacing and the feel of that movie was the same as the series?
Well, it's a movie, so obviously the pacing is going to be a little bit different in how.
Well, hey, have you ever seen Fire Walk with Me? I mean, it doesn't mean.
I mean, it's true. It's true. I think that the comparison I'm going to draw here may sound weird, but I'm going to compare Better Call Saul to Breaking Bad, and Better Call Saul is the better story. It's the better show by far. I think at the end of the day, Better Call Saul doing what it does is going to make Breaking Bad into a better show. Right, it's drawn a larger frame around the narrative that we experienced in the 6 seasons of Breaking Bad. Just like that, this film has drawn a larger frame around the 6 seasons that we get to go through.
Which is which in your comparison? The movie is
Better Call Saul. Yeah, I think what we just saw with the Sopranos film has completely well, you've never seen all the Sopranos, so Andrew and I can watch that, and we pick out 100 different little Easter eggs that are layered into these emotional elements in the show that over 6 seasons resonated with Tony. It actually caused him to question this existential dread that someone at the top of the mountain, when we meet him, is being eaten away from inside by the choices that he's made and that have been made for him and the situation that he's been in. And I will go on record saying that no show in the history of television prepared America more for Donald Trump than the fade to black at the end of The Sopranos in the 6th season. That emptiness that we were left with was filled. It was a void that was filled. And unfortunately, it was filled with a maniacal character who knew no bounds and came from an organized crime network that is unparalleled in human history. And this is what we've got. That's the answer to The Sopranos. We got the answer. I'm
gonna disagree and say The Apprentice tops Sopranos. That the Apprentice. Interesting, because see, from what you were saying, when you were saying your first thing, I thought you meant that The Sopranos was Better Call Saul and this movie was Breaking Bad, because to me this movie had more action and things, but it doesn't really matter. So here's my problem with the movie. We can table that one, and I got to get this out there, which Lord knows we got to be careful in 2021. I love everyone. I mean all good things. Yes. I never think bad about anyone ever. Whatever I'm supposed to say for the rest of you people. Why are you even listening to us if you don't want to hear true talk? Okay. You want to make a gangster movie? Is that what you want? You want to come to me and you want to make a gangster movie? Then you do not let an African American sit down and drink and eat with white people in 1968. No. Have you ever seen a mob movie where the guy didn't turn in the money? He didn't have the money to turn in, and they said, "Oh, it's okay. I wish you kind of had the money." But because it was a black man, what are you talking about? They would have killed him. They would not have sat with him. I don't understand why we're pretending that white people weren't racist in 1968. You're telling me they would have sat and let him sit down and have a drink in his place, and no one used the N-word ever to this person?
They did use the N-word.
No, not to him. Yes. Not to him. They did not. He called him that after to the girl out at the beach, but everyone treated that man with respect.
Race relations is a huge part of this film, a huge part of it.
But it's not realistic. You felt it was
in the streets aren't realistic. That happened.
That was out there, but not our characters. Oh no, our mob people, they were so woke. They let a black man in. That was ridiculous. Well,
ultimately,
if I was a black person, and I think I'm not allowed to say that now. So I'm empathetic, whatever word I'm allowed to say, I would be offended by that movie. Because they would have killed him. And why not have it be true? So none of you saw that at all? I really thought that movie, it just did not sit truthful to me at all.
I have a slightly different take.
Okay. And I'm fine to say I'm
I
wrong.
think I'm kind of cut out there for a
Oh,
second.
I just said I'm fine to be wrong. Tell me how I'm wrong, and I'll say I'm wrong.
I think that it's a few things there. Paulie, the character of young Paulie, when they were at the jazz club, I believe it was, when he came to sit down and have the drink, Paulie was that representation of the attitude that you're talking about. Like, why is he sitting here? This man does not belong at our table. And he's the one making the comment about, is that the drink you had at the plantation? But Dickie, I think one of the things that the film was trying to do was show the humanity in Dickie, the good and bad. And
you think somebody, I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but I want you to add this part. You think that person exists in 1968 in that world?
They were war buddies, weren't they? Isn't that the history of Dickie Moltisanti and the Leslie Odom character? I can't remember his name in the show.
No, Leslie Odom did not go to Vietnam, or did not go to the war.
World War II, yeah.
Dickie Moltisanti. Yeah, Dickie Moltisanti was in the war, but Leslie Odom's character was not. I think that they were trying to show the duality of Dickie Moltisanti, because there's the scene where he absolutely manipulates him into killing the other young man. And then there's the time when he treats him with respect. So we see that he does it both ways, that he has that moment where he's okay with him, but he still treats him like shit when he gives him the money. And he's like, you've already said your goodbyes, get out of here. Like, I've given you an inkling of respect, but that's as far as this goes. So yeah, maybe not completely historically accurate, but I don't think it was that inaccurate in the fact that Dickie still did treat this man like shit over and over again. You know, he pulls up the car, he hands him the $100 bill. He sends him over. The way that he manipulated him into killing the young man, I think, is really the prime example. He's like, this kid's giving you a light envelope. I would be embarrassed if I were you. Mm-hmm. Read between the lines. I'm telling you to go kill this young man right now.
And yeah, okay. Go ahead, Josh.
Organized crime isn't just about brutality and murder. It's about money. This is a business they're running. Right. And this guy was an asset. He went out and killed people for him. He collected money for him. Like he's an asset, just like you wouldn't go smash a computer with a sledgehammer because you couldn't get it started. Sometimes you got to treat it like a commodity. And I think that came through loud and clear throughout this, that, you know, it may have been, the black crew that was doing all the murdering and the money collecting on the streets, but they kicked up to the larger bosses and the underbosses. And I think that came through loud and clear for me.
And the Sopranos never shied away from racial tension. You know, if you look at Meadow bringing home her black boyfriend, you know,
well, I'm sure they didn't in the series, because we lived in a different time when you would handle that. It just didn't ring true to me. I'm just saying, sitting here, I thought,
well, here's how I know it's not different. Because they recreated a scene from the show. You remember when Tony goes down to the little amusement park and sees Janice there? So that's a scene in the actual show. And they reshot it with the new characters. And it was the same exact scene. He said the same words when they put him into the back of the paddy wagon. And it was the N-word. Why aren't you going to lock up the N-words? They're the ones that are burning the city down. And now we see that in a larger context of the race riots and relations that were happening there. And we understand how that impacted young Tony in a way that we didn't even understand from the original flashback from the original show. So what I'm saying is, like, it's consistent.
Okay, so your point was the only time they did it was when they had to do it from the scene that came in the original show, which they couldn't change because of the new way we look at the world. So I'm not sure your point takes out my point. I'm saying you're saying that they couldn't have changed that because you just said that was in the original series.
I'm saying
so
that the Sopranos have
been
consistent with the racial relations between white people and black people in the 1960s all the way up through what we see in the early 2000s with the show. That's my feeling on it.
You know, if you look at Dickie's job in the operation, he was in charge of the numbers. You know, he was the guy who ran this operation, and Leslie Odom's character was his guy on the ground. So to me, it made sense that he treated him with more respect than we saw him treat other characters, and that we saw Paulie treat him, for example, because that was the guy that was making him money. So it wasn't that he was respectful to him, but he let him sit down for half a minute before he had him get up from the table. He granted him a tiny little bit of dignity before he pulled him away and said, "That's enough. You've been here long enough. Take your money and get out of here." So it wasn't even showing him respect. It was just giving him a moment to feel like, okay, you've been here long enough. You got to go now.
Okay. I will bow to you. I'm not a Sopranos person. To me, that's all I can say is I thought, oh, this feels like we're getting that fake history. And the moment that we start taking away how horrible people were to African Americans in our time period, just to make us feel better now, is bad, and that's the way that I had felt about it. I also thought it was really heavy-handed that the United States government had to say, "Oh, he's white, he can go," while he literally had a dead body in there. It was real heavy-handed, like, "Oh, we didn't get it before."
Yeah,
and those are the things, like, yes, I don't know.
I forgot about that scene. Yeah.
To me, everyone, when it came to, and I think it's going to be hard for everyone, Quentin Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood doesn't have the strength that his other stuff. We're coming to a different time period where we're going to change what history was like when we cover things in the 60s. And it makes me nervous because white people need to feel horrible about how we were, not just then, but today and all the way through, because how people were treated was horrible. So I just wanted to have that discussion with two Sopranos people, because I didn't know how it comes out. I mean, does that guy play a part in the series? Is there a whole black mafia in the series?
There's one great episode from the first season where they deal with royalties to a rapper. I can't even remember his name. Damn it, I love that episode though. It's so good. A hit is a hit. That's the name of the episode.
Yep.
And I go back to that episode quite a bit in my own thoughts. I have a question for you both as writers about the many saints of Newark. Christopher Moltisanti's narration, his voiceover. I've seen it in a couple places. Some people are assuming that it's a script that was found, that he actually wrote this show that we've seen, The Many Saints of Newark, and he's the voiceover that's introducing it. And, obviously he has foreknowledge that his Uncle Tony is going to be the one who chokes him and kills him. Where are you guys sitting with this?
Well,
what do you think of the voiceover?
I mean, I remember that he was a screenwriter, because that, of course, is the Alicia Witt episode, which is another episode that I watched.
Well, he does actually write a movie and produces it called Slasher.
Yeah. But why would he know that Tony kills him?
That's what I'm asking you. What do you both think about
that's stupid. Again, I'm so genteel with my opinion. So genteel. How have I not been canceled? I think he's frozen. I mean, I hope he's thinking that hard. That'd be spectacular.
He really does look very contemplative.
He really does. It seems like he is blanking.
There he is.
You're almost coming back, Andrew, but you're not quite there. I don't see how it's a script. What do you think, Josh, while Andrew hopefully comes back in here?
I don't think it's a script, and I was a little bit put off by the idea of it, because if it is supposed to be a script, I don't think it's a very effective measure. First of all, to make that the conceit that it's a script that he wrote that was somehow found or something, I don't like that at all. Andrew, I'm sorry, we lost you, bud. What were you going to say?
Okay. I think I got the gist of the question, because it was kind of freezing for a while in me there. I don't think that's very plausible. I think The Sopranos always dealt with mysticism to some extent, and having a unreliable narrator really doesn't seem off-brand for The Sopranos at all. Christopher speaking from the grave to tell us the story fits in with the same show that had the Kevin Finnerty episodes, or had Big Pussy show up at Livia's wake, or Paulie and the was it the Virgin Mary at the Bada Bing? The Sopranos never shied away from mysticism. So to me, it didn't really feel off-brand at all to have a dead Christopher Moltisanti commenting on the story, and to tell the story from his perspective. And I think that The Sopranos always had unreliable narrators. You were hearing somebody's version of history, and that to me is one of the things I've been thinking about today, is how authentic is this compared to if Tony were to tell the story, or if James were to tell the story. did Johnny Boy bigger impact on his children than the version of the story that we saw? I don't know. This was Christopher Moltisanti telling us a story about his father and the
interesting
man
point.
that killed him.
Yeah.
I feel like I want to say something nice about it since I've been the grumpo butt. I loved the scene with, I'm going to call her a guidance counselor, and Tony. I thought how that connected to the Lorraine Bracco scenes and set up Tony, and then the follow-up scene with the mom. I mean, I said I really actually did enjoy the movie. I had some overall problems here and there, but that scene, that to me was more of the Sopranos and really a good scene. That's what I'd pick as the best scene. What about each of you? What's something that you really loved?
Andrew.
I need to think about favorite scene. The one that's sticking with me the most today is the murder on the beach. That was just such an intense scene that was very layered, when you think about that character. But visually speaking, watching him murder that woman on the beach and all the emotions that were going behind it, it's very haunting. And that's probably the one that's been on the brain the most. I wouldn't call it my favorite. It's just the one that has stuck with me the most so far today.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Josh?
I'm going to go with the scene of Uncle Junior walking out of the funeral, slipping on the stairs, breaking his ass. And then Dickie Moltisanti laughs at him in front of everyone. The fact that was the thing that killed Dickie Moltisanti was being so offensive to someone he should be giving respect and concern for in the moment is what killed him more than any other thing that he did in that show. And again, going back to empathy as the superpower, these are the moments that matter, that define our lives. And he failed so hard in that moment that it killed him. And I think that's a really interesting thing to think about.
What an interesting turn, to have Junior be the one responsible. That was a stroke of genius. And when you
I was shocked by it. It surprised me. So I love that part too.
The early relationship between Christopher and Junior, it adds some layers to that when you think about how Junior felt about Christopher in the beginning of the show. It's like, okay, like we can fill in some more backstory here. Junior, I think, was one of my favorite portrayals of the new actors playing these characters. I mean, he just did a phenomenal job.
All three of the consigliere and the underbosses, I thought were just perfectly cast. It couldn't be more perfectly cast. I mean, talking Twin Peaks level of casting here.
How did you guys feel about it? Obviously setting up to make another movie. I mean, just like almost as if it said to be continued.
I'm all in.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of feel the same way about that as I do when people talk about more Twin Peaks. I don't need it, but I would watch it,
Hell yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but the difference from Twin Peaks is they really, they even had to cut to show you that Leslie was still alive. To let you know we're coming back. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they said that he won. He won that war, and I thought that was a really cool acknowledgement. He beat the DeMaio family at that point in time. They weren't the Soprano family yet, right. But he got to move into their neighborhood, and that was kind of his what bitch moment, and I thought that was pretty cool.
The story is fascinating. Look at the gap we've got, and Scott, I'm gonna get a little detailed here, but Jackie Aprile in the scene where they knock over the ice cream truck was not a leader. Tony Soprano was clearly the leader of that young group. But somehow, by the time we meet them in the first season of The Sopranos, Jackie Aprile has become the leader of the group. So at some point, Tony supplicated his natural urges towards leadership out of respect and loyalty for his friends. And that is interesting to me. I feel like there's a whole story that needs to be told inside that gap that furthers this arc of corruption that happened to Tony Soprano's soul over time. And I think by the time we get to the end of it, no matter how many movies they make, that fade to black scene is people are going to be able to look at that and say that justice was done to Tony Soprano.
Yeah, I mean, I've written extensively about Tony, and a lot of people hate me for these articles, but I stand by every word. I think the show told us in season 3, we see that move towards the darkness where Tony becomes a little bit less charming. And season 4 is really that tipping point where he starts to give in to ego more than anything. And 5, 6, and the 2 halves of season 6, rather, is Tony completely ignoring his intuition. In the beginning of the show, he's much more inclined to follow his dream sequences, to listen to that voice inside of him. And the end of the show, it's a blatant defiance of his intuition and that better voice inside of him, and he's doing what he wants. And it is interesting to see him as a relatively sweet kid who wants to do good, and then compare it to the Tony that we see in the final season, who is snuffing out his own nephew, and the Tony who is abandoning Hesh the way that he did, and how cruel he was to Carmela, and contemplating killing Paulie because Paulie was annoying him on a vacation. Tony Soprano had completely turned to a place of darkness in that last season.
What better story for America?
I think it's weird that you guys. I think it's weird that you guys think Tony was so good in that. I mean, he ran numbers. He threw Camilla to the ground. I wouldn't say that he was
compared to what we get in the.
But you're saying, but he's just a kid at this point. I mean, he does. I don't know that it's totally, to use Susie's word from Curb, foisted upon him. I mean, I'm not saying he was the evilest person, but I didn't see him as a complete saint as a little kid. I mean, even from the very little, he wanted to be in that world because he said, wouldn't you like to know what's going on back there? I mean, I don't know that he was an innocent. I can't go that far.
I wouldn't say he's an innocent
Anakin Skywalker in episode 2.
Please. Now you should get canceled for that. I'm going to get in trouble. And you
just to irritate you, Scott.
I mean, episode 2. You're bringing up episode 2 on our 200th show.
Oh, come on. I think with Tony, it's more of a moral debate. There is part of him that wants to be good, but he has those tendencies to be drawn to the bad. And he can go both ways when he's younger. There are moments where he wants to be well behaved, but it's easier to give into the temptation and to run numbers or to attack Jackie and knock down Carmela. By the end of the show, there's no debate. He is a very one-track person.
Right. I would even say by the beginning of the show, there's no debate. I mean, I would say he was evil from the get-go. But who knows? I liked it. I mean, I'm sure no one's listening, but if you're mad at me thinking I actually did like it, that one aspect of the show just didn't ring as true to me as a Martin Scorsese gangster film or a Tarantino one back in the day. And it's just me being a little concerned at what art, if you want to tell the past, you got to be true to the past. That's all my point is. So don't hate us. We've gone on longer than we normally do, and why not? It's our 200th show. Not that anyone cares, but we're not numbering the shows anymore.
Yeah,
that's what Josh and I decided. We're done with the numbers. It's always hard for us to keep straight.
Yeah,
and it was we'd have to look. We couldn't remember. We're done. The next episode is just going to be about whatever the hell we want, and it might be in 3 years or it could be next week.
It's so true. And Andrew, congratulations. It's a huge milestone. I mean, I don't envy you the amount of work that's coming up in your life.
Yeah, luckily about a year into planning and work on it. So there's a good head start, but there's a lot of work to come. And like I said, we're looking at spring of next year, right around the 5-year anniversary of 25YL is when we're hoping to shut it down and rebrand into these new channels. But thank you.
Yeah, that is incredible. That's been 5 years. Oh my Lord.
Yeah, time moves fast. Yeah, time moves fast.
It really does.
If any of our listeners want to help, want to start writing, want to express themselves creatively about anything they're obsessive about, it's in the name. Contact Andrew, and you'll find a good home and a good audience there.
Yeah, I gave you plenty of things to be mad at me about. You could just write 3 or 4 or 5 articles just entitled Scott Ryan's an Idiot.
Scott Ryan reaction.
Here's why Scott is wrong.
Yeah, and that's a series right there.
Hold on, that's my territory. I am the expert on why Scott is wrong.
I mean, we've got to continue to be opinionated. Otherwise, what's the
Agreed.
point? So,
Also, it's not cynical. Like I said, love criticism. Cynicism, not a fan.
understandable. So, we're out of time. We're not going to discuss it, but if you're listening and you have not watched Only Murders in the Building, watch it. Maybe Josh and I will do a podcast on it when it's done.
I think so.
It's a great show. So,
yep.
Thank you, Josh, for 200 episodes. Thank you, Andrew, for all you've given to writers and television everywhere. And thanks everyone for listening to us for over 10 years. This is ridiculous.
It is ridiculous.
Congrats on 200 episodes, guys.
Thank you, friend. We appreciate that. So until next time, keep watching and keep listening.
Oh, no, that's just stop video.